Okay, here we go. I feel like I need to use an F word in the intro just to get us started, but no, I'm not going to.
Good luck.
Hello, everybody. My name is Lat Mackey, and this is Sequence Break, a podcast that features conversations with speedrunners, developers, content creators, and everything in between. And no, that's not my second time doing this today. Today, we're going to talk all about Super Mario Brothers 3 with TheHaxor. This is episode 82. Haxor, how you doing, man?
Doing well, man. How are you doing?
I'm doing great. In the chat, they say, yeah, well, you said it was live. Well, it is live, but I got to be honest, the overwhelming majority of people listen and watch after the fact. So anyway, I'm super excited to do this. This is actually, so we've touched on Super Mario Brothers 3 in the podcast before. A little primer, if you want to go back and listen and watch the Tampa episode, we could dive into the tasking and kind of like the history of SMB3. In this one, Haxor has been speedrunning. How long have you been speedrunning SMB3 at this point?
It's going to be 5 years in April for the main game because I got started with Mitch's RawMac competition before that, so it wasn't like the main game. So yeah.
Oh, cool. Okay, so this is
my
great.
First, yeah.
So I'm hoping we can dive into like, you know, how you got started and then kind of like how do you get better at the game and what are some of the things that it takes to get better at the game. But before we do that, how about like how'd you get started in gaming? I'm like, what are your first memories of playing games and what got you hooked?
Oh man, first memories of playing games. I was a kid, really little kid. My sister had a Nintendo when I was growing up. I didn't get to play the Nintendo because it was hers. It was a gift to her, you know, and she was older than me by like 9 years, so it was hers. But every once in a while, I get pulled out and we get to play on it. So I remember playing Mario 1 and Duck Hunt, and I think we had like Dr. Mario and some other games as well. Mario 3 was one of those games we would always rent, you know.
Oh, okay. As a rental for you.
Like, oh, yeah. Yeah. We didn't actually have Mario 3, but we rented it, and it was always a really fun game to play. I remember we rented Mario 2 once, and it was like, wait, this isn't like Mario 3. What is this thing, you know? But yeah, that's
cheap imposter Mario. No, I was kidding.
Yeah, this imposter. Exactly. Yeah, so, you know, I remember playing it there. That's probably my first memories of gaming. My first console that you know I jointly owned with her was the Sega Genesis, actually. So Sonic 2 was probably the first game I played extensively as a kid. Anyway, I played a lot of Sonic 2. I don't think we ever beat it, but we got to the like Metal Sonic.
It's a ridiculous fight in that
stage.
Game.
So yeah. Which, when you look at the speed run, it's like, oh, this fight's super easy. Why didn't I know? You know? But like when you're a kid, you're like, oh, I have no rings. If I take one hit, it's just over. So, yeah, that's probably the first console I had. Then it only really took off from there. I used to be like pretty active in sports and things like that, but my friends had no interest in sports. They like, you know, games. So, you know, it was N64, and then it was GameCube. Then it was Xbox, then it was Xbox 360. And then during that time, I got into PC gaming as well. Got into MMORPGs really early at like 12. So I was playing Ultima Online at like 12. Yeah. And Counter-Strike. And yeah, so all sorts of different games.
Just curious, for like the Sonic 2 thing, have you gone back as an adult or later on in life and tried to beat it or speed ran it or anything like that? It's a great game.
I wish I had a Sega. I would. Yeah. I don't have a Sega. Yeah, I could probably do it on emulator, but it isn't the same. It's just not the same. You got to have the clunky controller with all the weird buttons, and you know.
There's totally something to that. Like, and I know I got the nostalgia thing bad for that kind of stuff because I'm like you. I didn't go back and play all of the games that I had grown. I didn't grow up with the Genesis, but my best friend had one, and so Sonic 2 was the game we played all the time because one could play as Tails, one could play as Sonic, you know. And just having that controller just somehow puts me back in that like I'm 13 years old playing the old games. So
yeah,
that's cool. So you did online PC. Wow, you were online early, man. Like that's
yeah.
Do you still play the competitive games or anything? Oh, AOL. Oh man.
Yeah, we had 56K back then, you know. It's like you'd be trying to move across an Ultima Online and it would be like da 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 da. That's just how you had to play the game. That's, it's a different time. I remember when we got a cable internet finally, I was just like, whoa, this is the best thing I've ever experienced in my life.
I didn't get a chance to experience until I went to college and like the dorms had it, because I was like you, I was with the 14.4 and the 56K, and it's almost like life changing when you try out internet speed that fast.
Oh, you're like, I didn't realize I could do this. It's just like never considered it. In Counter-Strike, I was competitive because I think that was your question, right? About the competition part of it. I played in leagues in Counter-Strike. It was CAL is what the league, it was like Cyber Athlete League or something. I forget what the acronym stands for, but that was what, that was like the main league in Counter-Strike. So I had a bunch of friends. They're actually Canadian, strangely enough. They lived in Nova Scotia. I was in like the middle of the US, North Dakota, and we were on a team together, and played a lot of games with them for many years.
Oh, that's so cool. You mentioned what kind of, if you don't mind me asking, what sports did you grow up on too? Because I'm a sports fan myself, and I know when you're streaming on Twitch and stuff, sometimes you avoid the sports ball talk. But I'm all into, I love football and baseball and all that stuff.
I talk about it all the time. I know everybody's eyes probably glaze over in chat. It's like whatever. I love all sorts of sports. So for me, basketball is probably the one I played the most in terms of like typical team sports. Did Taekwondo for a couple of years as well when I was, really little. I don't remember any of it. So it's, got a black belt. Don't remember any of it because I was like 12. Yeah. So, totally. But I really love football. Yeah. I probably love football more than basketball. I just didn't love playing football. I loved watching it. And I like a lot of like strategy involved with football, but playing it, I didn't, when I tried to play it, I kind of got put out of position. I didn't have any interest in playing. So I'm like, this probably isn't for me. So
I had that issue with basketball. We were definitely a basketball family growing up, especially here in SoCal, all Lakers all the time. And when I went and tried play basketball, I was awful, could not have been worse at it. And I'm glad I still love it today, even though I went through, I was the guy, they put me in for the one quarter, they had to play you, and then they take you out. I was like, I couldn't shoot, I couldn't run, I was really just bad at all. But I love playing pickup basketball still to this day, but it's like, it's one of those things where I was not born with that gift.
No, I was short at the time too. That was my biggest issue in growing up, is I was really short. I was one of the shortest kids in the class. And then as I got to the end of high school, a lot of those kids didn't grow, and I did. And, I ended up being, maybe even above average height. So, but at the time I played it, I'm playing it in middle school in like 8th grade. I'm like 5 feet tall, and I'm the shortest guy in the court, and I'm not fast.
Right.
I can shoot, but like that doesn't matter when everybody's like 6 feet tall.
Yeah, exactly.
How am I getting? I'm not fast, so I can't get open. It's just like, it's over.
it makes you appreciate, I will say, like guys in the NBA and in college ball who are 6 feet tall or shorter and can still play the game. It's kind of unbelievable, to be honest with you.
Yeah, they got to have some real skills, real athleticism too, usually.
For sure, man. Born with some gifts. It has to be. I mean, like that, and you're working your ass off, I'm sure. So how'd you find the speedrunning thing? How did that come about? Did you watch it first, see it first before you tried, or was there things maybe you tried growing? Like, what's your story there?
It's a great question. So I think in like 2017, I was probably running out of stuff to watch on YouTube. Basically, the algorithms giving me random stuff. Summoning Salt was one of the things that came up. It's probably like mid 2017. I think it was his video he made about 4.2 in SMB1. I watched that video and I really enjoyed it. And I started watching the other ones. I watched all of them in a row, basically. And one of them was about Mario 3. And, it talks a lot about Mitch, obviously, because, he's a big part of the history of that game.
For sure.
And so, one of the things they mention is, he's got a Twitch channel. I'm like, oh, this guy actually streams this game still, and he's live right now. So I start watching Mitch as he's going for the world record at the time in Warpless. Crew had the record at 50:57. And so Mitch was trying to chase that, trying to get his first sub 51 there. And so I got to watch that grind, and I'm watching it and I'm thinking, I'm like, I wonder if I could do this. This looks kind of interesting, just I like what he's doing here. And so I ended up just going on Facebook Marketplace. I pick up an NES, saw Facebook Marketplace. Guy was super nice, by the way. Sent me, he sold me like probably the best NES I have as well. Unfortunately, it's HDMI modded now. A little did I know that screws with the frame rate, but it's a great NES. I love it. It's the best NES I own. But yeah, that I started messing around with that, and then started playing on emulator because I could do it on my PC. And that's kind of just how I got started. Was he had his ROM hack competition, and I started playing that on emulator. And yeah, it's kind of the rest is history from there, I guess.
Okay, I want to ask a lot of questions about that, but I got to first ask about the NES. Yeah. I had no idea the HDMI mod that, or at least the one you had done, messed with the frame rate.
Yeah, so to meet the standard, it's got to underclock it slightly. So it's that it's that 60.
Yeah, 60 it's not
FPS
60.08 or whatever. What the normal.
Yeah,
one is.
exactly.
Oh, wow. Okay, I had no idea.
Yeah. Yep. So it runs a little slower. So you're losing about 2.5 seconds every 10 minutes.
Jeez. And if it wasn't SMB3, I mean, those seconds could be the difference. Like,
Yeah. Yeah.
Brutal.
Exactly.
So was in the first runs that you actually were attempting, was it for Mitch's ROM hack, or was it the actual vanilla game?
That's right. Yeah, it was the ROM hack competition. So got involved in that, and I did really well in the ROM hack competition. So for most of it, I had the top time. I got beat out at the end, and I could have won it, is the thing. I could have won it, but I was trying to do an additional strategy that would have just I would have been by far the winner, and I was trying to get it done. So there was like a wall jump that was added to the run that saved, like 4 seconds. I was trying to add an additional wall jump. There's another level you can wall jump in. And so I was trying to get both, and you got to get both for first try, obviously, right? So I couldn't get both in time, but I got them both after the fact. So I do have the world record in technically now, but I took second in the competition, unfortunately.
I realize we should probably tell what this is too. So Mitch made a ROM hack specifically for a competition. Yeah. I believe he offered a cash prize for it, and it was for a specific period of time, right? If I remember correctly.
That's right. Yep.
So how long did you have to grind out? I don't even remember what the time. It was pretty short.
Yeah, it was 1 month. So
okay, so it was only a month. Yeah.
Yeah. You only had a month to do it. It was kind of a simple rearrangement of just some levels he made.
Okay.
Of Mario 3, they're not like Kais or anything. They're standard levels. They're probably easier than the regular game as well. I would say, I mean, we made them a little harder by, doing things like wall jumping and that you're probably not expected to do, but yeah. So, they're just, there's, how many was there on there? There's about 10, I think.
Yeah, I think so. I remember it wasn't too long because once again, you only had a month to do it. So,
yeah. And he had 2 secrets in there. So part of it was, had to find the secrets. Of course, they were found within a couple days. And then it was just like optimizing the route after that.
I gotta stop for just 1 second, mention that I've probably said it a bunch of times, but there's a couple different ways I got into speedrunning, but definitely one of them was seeing Mitch early on in, I think 13 or 14 at the GDQs. And it's come up more than once that he's kind of an inspiration for a lot of people who have gotten into this crazy thing and tried it out. So glad to hear it worked for you as well. Then what made you finally think about trying the vanilla and going for some of those runs?
Yeah, it's a great question. I did well in the competition, so I was like kind of practicing before the competition started. I was tinkering around with the levels. I was playing it on my flat screen. I didn't realize like any of this stuff mattered at the time. Obviously you learn after a while that, there's input delay. I didn't realize. I didn't really think about that. And so you learn about all this different stuff. But yeah, I was messing around with like 1-1 and 1-2 and 1-4. And I was trying to get all of them to where I could do them. And then I got to the point where I was like, okay, I can do all of these. Let's do them in order. And we have to do them in order correctly. So once I could do that, I was like, okay. And then I just moved on to the other levels. And it turns out that if you can play those 3 levels really well, you kind of understand at least a basic bones enough to where you can kind of learn a lot of the other levels of the game. So
it's pretty amazing how well those teach you the mechanics, not just of the game, but then of the speedrun as well. I know the first game I ever tried was SMB3. I went with the 80% wrong warp category, and I was surprised, like, oh shit, this what I'm doing right now carries over really well into World 8 and some of those levels at a much more advanced level. But if you can learn these mechanics, this is how you do it.
Yeah, exactly.
So when you finally decided to take on like a full run, which category did you attempt first, and how long did it take you to finally actually like learn a run?
Warpless. Yeah.
Okay, it was warpless.
It was warpless. So I was trying to get a sub hour. That was the first goal.
That was the goal.
You know, let's get the sub hour. And I think it took like 3 or 4 PBs to get there. It didn't take very long. It was like once I learned the run, which I just went world by world and tried to learn every stage. And I was like, okay, I kind of understand the stages. Let's actually play a run. And I'm like, okay, this is really hard because I've got to now play them all back to back to back to back to back. And that's kind of the challenge here. And then it was just remembering, okay, which stage do I play again here? Is it 4 or is it 5 or is it 5 or is it 6? You know, so some of those early runs are a little funny. And I do have them highlighted on my channel. You can go back and watch them. It's just, if you want to see what it looked like when I was really bad. But it was just basically that, just learning that and then playing some runs, getting sub hour pretty quickly. And I was like, okay, let's try to just get more PBs. I didn't really have a goal after that until I started getting lower. And I was like, okay, let's get a 53. And then I was like, okay, let's get a 52. Now 50, stuff like that.
When you're starting with the warpless category and you're doing your attempts, are you looking up any tutorials? Are you asking other people in Discord or anything like that? Like, kind of what's your process on getting better other than, doing the levels over and over again?
So at the time, my process was, I'm going to look at the best runs on the leaderboard and what do they do? And I'm going to try to do the same thing. That's really hard to do when you're not good, by the way. Mitch also had the warpless seminar, which he's never finished, but it does go into World 3. So I watched all those to learn all those levels, and then I kind of had to teach myself the rest of the levels from there. But now I've gotten better at speedrunning. It's still kind of what I do. I maybe don't look at the world record. I'll look at the world record, but I'll look at a lot of other runs too, because there's a lot of ways to, like, what's the old adage? Like, there's a lot of ways to skin a cat or something.
Right.
And you kind of learn that watching different runs. There's like subtle differences in some of the ways runners will do strats that I'll find easier or harder. And I'll just figure out, like, oh, this one seems easier. And I'll try it and I'll figure it out. And, if I can do that, I'll go from there. Sometimes I just discover things that no one else really does that work for me. And I'm like, all right, this it works. And that's all that matters. So it's stuff like that. It's asking questions too. I asked a lot of questions. I asked Mitch questions when I met him in person, hung out with him a bit too. And he showed me stuff when I went and visited him and stuff like that. Other runners have come to my stream too, and I've asked them questions. I know at the time I was learning, like, Karu would come in the stream and he gives some advice too. So there's the community that I would go to, the old Mario Discord. I'd ask questions in there. Now it's the new Discord we ask questions in, so it's kind of the same process. So it's all that stuff into just getting the knowledge you need, and that's great. Once you have the knowledge, then it's just like, all right, how do we get consistent? And that's a whole different journey, of course.
I know that not everyone streams their attempts and stuff. Some people don't have the capabilities and all that kind of stuff. But I have noticed, even to this day, folks, new runners, people who have just like started SMB3, if they're streaming it and, there are still, it seems like SMB3 runners will go to watch those folks. Like, there's something about seeing somebody learning the game for the first time. And I don't know if you had any of those experiences with your own stream, but because that's always a nice way to too, is like just seeing other runners, like giving you the feedback and stuff like that.
Yeah, definitely. That's the way the community is. You see it, it's not just Mario 3. You see it, I think, in Mario 1 too. There's a lot of folks that do that. Mario 2, when I was playing that, was the same sort of thing. It's like, oh, someone's playing Mario 2. Look, Kurt and Ethan are in the chat. It's
yeah, exactly.
yeah. So yeah, I think that's a big part of it, is just you get that free advice basically.
There's kind of a question about this in the chat, and you mentioned it too, about like, as you start to build, you want to start working consistently as you started to learn parts of the run.
Mm-hmm.
And I assume that's to at least give you a chance to hopefully give it up to the RNG gods, with hands and everything like that. What's that grind like? And is that just one of those things where you're just constantly doing it over and over and over again? Or are at this point, are you breaking it down? Like, how do you build that consistency? Do you do it with chunks, or are you trying to do, try to do full runs and things like that?
Yeah, that's a good question. So I think at first, to build consistency, or to like learn the strats and be able to do them, at least that doing the individual levels is obviously, really good. The one problem or trap you fall into when you do that is like, I can be great at a level, but can I be great at that level after I played 5 other very different levels?
Yeah.
And that's a totally different skill to build. So I'm a big believer. I'll play like full worlds, and I'll also do things like I have to do this level 10 times in a row without making a mistake.
Oh, there you go.
And if I make a mistake, I go back to 1. And I do this. And I've had to do that with several levels, like 610. I remember there's like a 2-hour practice session that was, on my own off stream, where I was just I'd get to like 8 or 9 in a row in 610, just perfect.
Yeah.
I get to that last one, or that second to last one, and I'd mess it up, and I'd be like, oh no, dude, I've got to go all the way back. And it's just like pain, you're going through pain. But if you can do that 10 times in a row, you're going to hit it. You're going to be able to hit it in runs. You might not hit it every run, but you'll be able to do it. I guarantee it. And you'll do it a lot, more often too. But yeah, from there, then it goes into full worlds. And when I was trying to get really consistent at those, it'd be like, all right, I've got to play World 4, but I've got to play World 4 flawless 5 times in a row. So, and then it's like you get through 3 times, and the 4th one, you like screw up on the 4th. You're like, oh my God, dude, I've got to go back to the beginning. And then you keep doing it. And that's just, that's how I built a lot of it. And I think it just naturally kind of happens over time too. As you do more runs, you just kind of get used to it and stuff like that. But that's kind of my method anyway.
Dude, that's such a good point, man. And by the way, I've heard Steph Curry, Kobe Bryant, all these folks talk about it. It's not so much just getting in the reps; it's actually doing good reps and doing them correctly and getting the right thing. That's how you build that. That's a really good point. It's one of those things. I gotta tell you, I forget. I've learned that there's no way I'm going to be able to recreate PB pace going into the final boss or the final level. Like that kind of level of adrenaline is just really tough to recreate. But if I've done it enough times right, I know that I can at least rely on that muscle and that kind of thing. So
you try to like focus yourself mentally then, right? You're just like, just play, play. Just like, don't think, I don't have to think about anything. I just do what I've always done,
Yes.
Yeah.
What were some of the tricks? Because you mentioned wall jumping, there's clipping, there's all this kind of, especially in the run nowadays, it's gotten so wildly optimized. What were some of the challenging strats for you to learn? And is it just one of those things where you kept getting at it to try, or was there some sort of click in the brain or something?
Basically, and this is like with any run, you just start adding stuff that's a little more risky over time. Once you start to feel confident with what you can do, it's like, what more can I do?
Yeah.
And then you start taking your mouth a little more, and that's a little more, and now it's at the point where, we pretty much all, at least the very top runners pretty much do almost the exact same strats. And there are certain things you don't do just because they're considered like, they end the run at a spot that's very inconvenient, and they don't save a lot, like Door 3 or Jesus Clip, things like this. And things like Jesus Clip are also RNG on top of it. So, there are circumstances where you do those things, but yeah, for the most part, it's just, what more can I do basically, and starting incorporating those things. I really enjoy that process of like learning. Sometimes I think I've enjoyed the game less because I feel like I'm like, what more do I have to learn right now? What can I learn? If I struggled with that for a while, is figuring that out and continuing to be motivated, even though I'm not necessarily learning something. I still learn. I realized I still learn small things, but they're subtle. They're like little efficiencies that make something like slightly more consistent. Maybe 1 in 20 runs, it works, more often if I just tweak it this way. And I find stuff like that all the time.
That's so interesting that you say that, because I got to imagine that's the kind of stuff that keeps you interested too. Because if it's just the same thing over and over again, I imagine there's got to be a reason that keeps you coming back. We talked about Mitch earlier. We've been doing it for, I don't know, 12 years now or something like that. You've been at it for 5 and you haven't, I mean, you're still, I was watching you stream last night. You're still grinding. And so looking for those little things, that seems like a good way to keep the interest up as well, to find those little optimizations.
Yeah. And it's the times at this point. It's just like, I with Mario 3, it's like, I can tell you that I'm one of the best, but like, you can't always prove with your time. You've got, to prove with your time, you've got to put in a lot of runs.
Yeah.
So that's kind of always the struggle with Mario 3. It's like, it's not necessarily how good you are or how well you can play. It's like, do you play well at the right time?
And I think there's always that possibility, especially with the SMB3, where there might be something new that comes around. Once again, in the chat, the last year or so, we've seen this RNG manipulation thing. But I remember even just a couple years before that, finding out about the Hammer Brothers and what that meant with what direction they're facing. Like, there could be another break. My guess is there will be at some point something new discovered that's going to impact the run as well.
I think the biggest thing that's been found since I've been running that made these lower times achievable has really been just the sub-pixel manipulation for 7.1. I can tell you, I can probably count on one hand the number of times I hit it first try before sub-pixel manipulation.
Wow.
And now I've hit it like a dozen times in a row before. It's just like, it's so much easier getting that first try. And if you miss it first try, then you're gambling again. You'll see people lose 20 seconds just trying to get in that wall. Being able to control that thing is just one less thing, one less important RNG element you got to worry about in the run.
I want to ask you about that, because I know there are practice ROMs that give you your pixel and your sub-pixel information so you can practice it and stuff. But when you're actually in the run, how the hell do you know if you've hit the right sub-pixel? Like, that seems like such a challenging thing to me. Is there any sort of visual cue, or is it just something you're just going on feel at that point?
Yes. Yeah. So the way Mitch and I manipulate it is I try to move right first, because the way the subpixels are numbered 0 to 15 in Mario 3, it's just arbitrary. There's 16 of them, so we just number them 0 to 15, right? For 7.1, for instance, we need 14 and 15. So that's on the furthest right. That's the furthest right subpixel on a pixel. So I know if I go over and step a pixel over, I'm on a low subpixel, because you go from low to high. It's almost like if you're zooming in on Mario on a microscope, you can kind of like more accurately see his location. That's like what a subpixel would be. So what I try to do then is do really light taps. You do like, you got your D-pad here. It's just like you're doing little taps, like little taps with your thumb, just really light ones.
Yeah.
And as soon as he moves over and goes back left, you've got a high subpixel. And if you're doing those taps light enough, and that's where we use the ROM, so we kind of have an idea of how much we're moving when we're doing these taps. You have a reasonable idea that, hey, I'm on 14 or 15.
Interesting. Okay, so that's one of the ways that you can get it more consistent. Because I mean, now it's, I hate to take it for granted, but you all do it so consistently in the runs. It's kind of mind blowing, to be honest.
Yeah. It's just so important. I mean, everyone hates losing runs to that level. It's just, Now, to be that all being said, the standing clip is still a frame perfect jump. So you got one frame you got to jump on. But it's always, it's the same. It's the same every time. So you do in practice, you get pretty consistent at it. And I feel like jumps from the ground that are frame perfect are a little easier than wall jumps, which I think aren't that hard either, compared to like things like a frame perfect A release or something like that has a much worse visual cue. And it's stuff like that. I think it's a lot easier.
You mentioned the wall jumps, and how do you describe to somebody how to do those type of things? Because I think that's one of the things when we're watching as a viewer. Once again, y'all make it look so easy, and then when I try it out myself, or maybe I'm playing through a ROM hack, I'm like, what the heck? I just feel like it randomly happens when I clip into the wall and be able to jump off of it.
Yeah, you got to do it a lot. It's a timing thing. It's a rhythm thing. I don't know how else to describe it. I do look at something, but I don't like hyper focus on it. It's a rhythm thing. I've done the level so many times that like my finger just presses A at the right time. It's like I always do the level this way, and then I'm getting here near the wall, and I just know, oh, I'm going to hit the wall then, because I know my distance from the wall and I know how to time the jump, right? And that's all it really comes down to. Knowing whether you can do it or not in Mario 3, if you hit the wall and Mario like kind of stops and stutters a bit, then you're like, okay, I could have wall jumped there because I actually clipped into the wall a little bit, which is what allows you to actually do it. So, it's basically just a lot of repetition for that.
A question I see so often, and it's probably we know so much about SMB1, Summoning Salt, all of the great runners who do all the SMB runs, including yourself. You've got a sub 5, which is kind of blowing my mind how many people have sub 5s. Does SMB3 have like a frame rule type of system like SMB1 does? Like, are there things where we could start, looking at RNG that way as well? Does it impact the game the same way?
There are things that are similar. Yeah, obviously that game, the frame rule system has to do with the level advancement. So, we don't have anything like that. The level can advance on any frame, right? But those frames determine things like hammer bro RNG, which is where the sub or the early hammer manipulation comes in, right? But there are frame rules that exist in the game, and understanding them can be valuable. You don't have to understand necessarily the details, but you kind of just understand how they work. Like P speed, for instance, once you've started building your first arrow, I believe the check happens every 8 frames afterwards to see if you're still moving forward. And if you are, you build another one and another one and another one, right? So understanding these things, that's how you can do some advanced P speed strats with wiggles. They were always considered like, if you watch the task, that like in 6-6, the task will do crazy wiggles, get P speed, and then clip the level.
It's amazing.
And that's impossible. Yeah, it's impossible for a human to do.
Right. But
the concept of those task wiggles, the wiggles, we use that to get certain P speeds, like 4 or 5 P speed, for instance. That's like a task, but we only do one, off the pipe versus, at the exact frame a billion times. Yeah.
No, it seems reasonable. And that's the other thing I always find kind of interesting about the SMB3, all of the runners, or especially at the top level, is trying to implement. Every once in a while, you'll see somebody try a task strat out that might be possible. Who the hell knows until you try something? I mean, we know you can't do 2 inputs at the same time. That's just not possible on the console. But it is. I always love seeing like when folks try to go for some of those, because first it makes them run really interesting. But then those are really hard. It's really blows my mind how challenging those things can get.
Yeah. There's some other small things too, just the way some enemies work. Certain enemies, it'd basically be similar to a frame rule system, but we call them like boss timers.
Okay.
In Mario 3. So like a boss timer would be from the time you complete the last level to the time where you get to a certain point in the next level to determine your pattern that you get from a specific enemy. So we call it a boss timer because that's how it works for entering the pipe on the airship, for instance. And that's how we know the pattern that the bosses give us. But there are other enemies that seem to work on a boss timer too, like the enemies in 7-8, the fire nippers, the patuis seem to also be on that same sort of timer. But there aren't many enemies that are. Most of them are on a level timer, so they'll do different things based on when they appear in the level. But some of them are just basically they do the same thing whenever they spawn. But yeah, there's all sorts of small little timers that I guess would be similar to like a frame rule too.
The boss timer stuff is super interesting because I can see how aggressive y'all can be, especially you. Like when you get to the end of World 1 or World 2 or whatever, and you can really use those patterns to your advantage to save some time, hopefully there.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, you can at least kind of predict. I mean, they do weird stuff sometimes, depending on, because as you can imagine, since you're moving from one level, completing one level to another, and there's overworld map movement, that'll affect it as well, the pattern you get. So you got to have clean movement there and consistent movement. And, there's times you can get there. There's some worlds you get there too fast and it gives you a bad pattern. And you're just like, really, like 99 times out of 100, I get a good pattern here, but somehow I just like move too fast this time, just too many frame perfect inputs and stuff. And yeah, the game gives you the wrong pattern. That happens too, but pretty rare.
For you personally, I know Warpless and 100% World 7 becomes a big deal. And yes, we can talk about hands and RNG, but that's all it is. Hands is just an RNG type of thing. It's up to the RNG gods at that point. Is World 7 the most challenging for you? And what's kind of the best way to approach it if it is? Like is one of those things you just spend more time with it, or do you just go for the clips first? Like what's a good approach, I guess, to World 7?
Yeah. I don't think the levels in terms of how you have to play them, a lot of them aren't that bad. It's weird. It's got some really like free levels that almost are out of place.
No kidding.
But then it also has levels that are really hard, like 7F2, 7-8's not easy. And 100% you've got 7-5 as well, which is a pretty challenging level. The way we do 7-2 now is pretty challenging. But then you've got like 7-3. And 7-3 is just like you get P speed and run for the most part and jump off enemies. And then you've got like 7F1, which is you just fly to a pipe. And you've got 7-6, which, if you have a P-wing, you just fly over. Or in Warpless, we clip now. So it's a little more challenging. But yeah, it's just, it's kind of got a mix of both. I would say at a certain point, you start focusing on the clips, the manipulations, at least for like 7-1 for both categories, and then 7-6 and Warpless once you get down to a really low time. But yeah, I mean, it is the most challenging world, I'd say, to have like a clean playthrough, just because of, the clips and stuff like that.
Do you, now spending this amount of time with it, do you have like a favorite category, or is it just one that you kind of feel like going for? Like what makes you decide to jump back between Warpless and 100% and, things like that?
I really like both of them. They both have, I think, different things that are really nice about them. Warpless, I think, is a little more friendly to get into. It's a lot shorter by like 20 minutes, obviously.
Way less auto-scrollers.
Yeah. And some of the levels you add in 100%, I know everyone likes to like bag on 100%. It's got a lot of auto-scrollers, but some of those levels you add are not easy as well. It definitely adds some really challenging levels. So I think and there's a lot of like weird routing stuff you have to do in 100%. And Warpless, once you figure it out, you kind of know just, okay, I got to get this bro and this bro ideally, and I try to skip the rest. But Hundo's like, all right, the bro moved here. Do I burn my cloud to try to go get it? Do I burn a music box to make it stuck there? What are the benefits and downsides of each? Things like that. So there's a weird, where do I use my items? Because I have a lot of them, and then using your items a consistent way, so then they appear in the same spot every time. So you save a lot of time with your menuing by using the items. And that's a challenge in both categories, but it's more in 100% because you've got a lot more junk items in your inventory. So navigating through that. So yeah, I would say for Warpless, it's probably a little more forgiving initially to learn. Less levels, simpler inventory, simpler strategy just in terms of the bros and stuff. But then 100%, I think, once the times get really low, you have a lot more control over your time until it gets really, really low. But you won't see people with like a 52-minute run that should have been a 51-minute run, except they didn't get no ads. You won't see stuff like that in Hundo. So
I gotta say, one of the things I guess I tend a little bit more towards enjoying watching Hundo runs. I remember one of my favorite runs is Karua's last PB at 100%, where he takes a death and then he waits and then he actually goes and finishes the run. I've noticed that's one of the things about Hundo, as much as challenging as it is, because there are some, you're not kidding, some of these levels are super tough, is that you do actually you can continue runs. There are some things that happen that aren't complete deal breakers, which I think is kind of nice about a category if you're thinking about attempting one.
Yeah, the bro thing in Warpless is a killer, right? You might fight an extra bro and it's a worthless item, and it's like, oh, I just lost over 10 seconds because a star ran into me in World 5 and I didn't want it. So yeah, it's brutal. And then the hands, it's like every hand's 20 seconds, So, and then now we're clipping 7-1 and 7-6. So there's 2 subpixel manipulations where you've got to be able to do those correctly and get those clips very quickly. You don't have to worry about that as much in Hundo until the time gets really low, and then you add more clips and, you're in the same boat. But at least once you get the clips, you don't have the hands to worry about afterwards. So.
You mentioned earlier on that when you first started running the game, you had some goal times you wanted to set and things like that.
Yeah.
At this point where you're at, is there a goal where you think you might actually put the game down or quit it, or is it just one of those things where you might set a goal and then continue on with? Is there anything like that the way you do it, or just try to hit some times?
I feel like once I get a 109, I think I'm good. I think so, but I don't know. I mean, there might be things that are found. Early hammer manipulation might get it's already getting a lot more reasonable.
Yeah.
Over the past year, just they've made a lot of improvement in it, and how it works and its consistency. Maybe it gets to the point where that's just not as daunting, because right now I think about it, I'm like, even though you get a lot more, it's like I might only get to play 3 runs a stream, and that might work if I'm Mitch and this is what I do. But for me, it's like I don't get those opportunities. Right. So it's like, he can be fine with only getting 5 runs in a stream. He's like, oh, that's what I do for a living. I'll just come back tomorrow and do the same thing. For me, it's just like, man, it seems like it feels more daunting in that regard.
I got to tell you, that's when I really knew that I was a speedrunning fan. I remember watching before we had the manipulations. I would watch Mitch do early hammer deaths, and he would just sit there, reset World 2 all day. And sometimes you wouldn't even get one run. I'm like, and I'm still watching. I'm like, what the hell am I doing? But it was still, it's interesting because this could be the run. There's that, that aspect to it.
You're hoping for it, right? Exactly. You want to see
it. You mentioned, and I actually saw just some folks chatting about it today, this idea of these manipulations and using tools outside of the game to help you with your actual real-time game. And I'm wondering, do you have any thoughts on it? Is it something where whether good or bad, I don't know, but do you think, is it something that's interesting to you? And is it something you mentioned is it something that you might consider actually doing if it does get a little more reasonable? Do you like watching it? I'm curious, just some thoughts on those type of things.
Yeah, I probably would. If it got to a certain point, I don't see why I wouldn't, I guess. If it just got really convenient. Even though I say that, I'm like, oh man, I've got to because you've got to get the run again.
Oh yeah, dude.
Except this time with this early hammer manipulation, it's like, but I already have the run, I think probably, I think it's really nice for this game, because the bullshit thing about that whole thing is that early hammer just doesn't happen that often.
Right.
And someone's going to eventually, if you don't allow something like this, someone's eventually going to put up a time that they're just going to get so lucky that it's just untouchable. So it kind of, in a way, allows competition to still exist, I think.
I mentioned it earlier, but that 100% Karua run, his Hammer Brother movement was unreal in the first 5 worlds. It was literally ones, maybe some twos. There was no, and so to your point, had that been nonstop, that run could have been, now we have some new strats and stuff, but that was on that level you're talking about. And so
well, at the time it was anyway.
Right. Yes.
Nothing was close. He died, and like nobody was close. Nobody even wanted to try to go for that record. It's so good. Yeah.
So wild. No, I think that's a really good point too. That you bring up a really good point that somebody's going to do it anyway, and I think that's kind of my feeling about it too. That like it's still you, Haxor, playing the game, even though you're using a tool to help assist you in doing it. It's not somebody else pressing the buttons or using their brain. So
right.
And in the end, that's what it comes down to.
It's not doing inputs.
Right.
Yeah, it's not doing inputs, and I think that's the important thing. Is for me anyway, I think that's the important thing. I don't really care. I mean, if people want to use a metronome, that would annoy the shit out of me personally, but I mean, go right ahead.
Metronome's the worst.
Yeah.
But I mean, that's how people help do the step counters and, and when they're on some of the RPGs and things, overworld stuff, thing like that. So totally agree with that. And I know with a game, like you still have to execute. Like in Mario 3, there's still tons of other stuff that can happen. Not to mention you got to press the buttons at the right time.
Yeah, exactly. I think sometimes with certain games, it'd be hard to tell if people were cheating, but like with Mario 3, if we banned it and people were doing it, it'd be very obvious they were doing it just based on, why are you just like randomly not playing this level as fast as possible, despite the fact that you're clearly really good at the game.
Super
interesting.
Easy. Yeah. What's going on? For you personally, was there like a PB you hit that you or a run that you did that's quite memorable? Maybe it's a marathon run or anything like that that's memorable in your head for being like, oh, that one felt good.
Yeah, I've got some runs that are memorable in different ways. My first GDQ run at SGDQ 2019. The All Forts race,
great race,
the rematch in a way. Yes. For a lot of reasons. Obviously, it's my first live marathon run, cool. And it was a bonus run, and it was like, you're looking at, is the incentive going to get met? It's not real close, and then all of a sudden, they're doing the stuff beforehand, and then because I think they were doing was it Mario Maker? No, it wasn't Mario. It was the ROM hack race. That's right. Yes. It was the S&W ROM hack race. And then all of a sudden it just, it gets met. I'm like, oh crap. Okay. Now I've got to really like go on stage. So I get on the stage and everyone else is using a CRT. I'm going to use a monitor because I play on a monitor, right? And it's weird. At that time, it's really weird to play on a monitor. Like I feel like I'm one of the I feel like I'm one of the pioneers to be like, no, monitor owns. I can show you, and a lot of people have picked it up now. But yeah, so I'm playing on monitor, and the weird thing is the ones they had in the private practice room weren't the same monitor as they had on the main stage. And
no.
I'm like, oh, dude, I knew this would be important to I thought it would be the same. So it was different. It's fine. This monitor was good. Huge ViewSonic monitor, like massive. We're talking like 32 inches or something,
and you're like this close to it. Like you have to sit close to, there's not a lot of room there.
Exactly. Yeah. It's a big boy. So they put it up and I'm looking at it, I'm like, wait, the aspect ratio is not right. So I didn't realize this when I just plugged in my NES and started playing it, but I actually play stretched.
Dude. I remember watching you do this practice run. I'm like, what the hell is wrong with your screen?
Yeah.
I'm so used to 4x3. And I'm like, how do you even play like that? My brain is broken.
Yeah. So I'm I'm like, hey, can you make it stretch? And they're like, what? I'm
what the hell's wrong with this guy, dude?
I play stretch. They're like, okay. So they fixed it for me. It's stretched now. So everything's good. Yeah. Fixed it. So there's one other thing that happens. So in Mario 3, if you recall, the start screen's really trolly, right?
Yeah, totally.
And that if you wait too long, it'll just show up. And so before starting your run, you always got to reset to make sure you can time the countdown.
Mm-hmm.
So I reset. This damn monitor had a setting in it. Every time it reset, the monitor would flicker on and off. This box would appear in the middle of the screen. So I've got to play the first level of the run and I can't see Mario at all. There's just a box in the middle of my screen. And if you watch, I actually don't make a mistake. I play small Mario. I have a perfect 1-1. Hardest level of my life. Because I can't see, I'm like, I think Mario's kind of like right there on the screen, and you've got to like side jump off of a Koopa and stuff. It's just terrible. And once that level is over, I'm like, okay, no level in this entire run is going to be as hard as the one I just played. So we're fine. We're good.
It's funny that could be a total freak out, but it actually makes the rest of the run a tad more easier.
Yeah. I mean, right away you're just like, oh my God, this sucks. And then you're like, well, I mean, that was really stressful and now it's over. So you know what? I mean, we've kind of hit the max stress there.
I love that race you're talking about, and if you haven't watched it, folks, go watch it, because it's when you're playing with somebody like Mitch, who's like been doing this forever, and it plays at the top. Okay, you're playing for second, but it wasn't like that for a lot of that run. Like there was some moments where it was super close, super interesting. Things changed, and I think that's kind of interesting to your point about the game. Like anything could kind of happen, right? On one run. So
yeah, I mean, nobody expected me to win, but I expected to win.
Hell yeah, dude.
I went and I'm like, I expect to win this. Mitch hasn't even been really practicing that much because he's worrying about Grand Poo World, and Mitch thought I was gonna win. Everyone thought Mitch was gonna win. I said, I was like, probably Mitch would win because he seems to win these, but in my mind, I'm like, I'm gonna win. This is gonna be great. I'm gonna win. I'm gonna beat Mitch at GDQ in the first run, and it's gonna be awesome. And then, I got 3 hands and he got 1.
Right.
And,
that was it.
He had a slight lead anyway, but
that's right. He was slightly.
It was really close.
Super close. Yeah. And I mean, that's up to the gods at that point. And look, I was also, I'm glad you mentioned that run too, because if anybody there's a recent documentary that came out, they announced it during GDQ, Running with Speed. You can actually see some of the behind the scenes. You can see all of you sitting there during the run, which is kind of cool to see that make it into the documentary and stuff like that too. I thought that was cool.
Yeah. Yeah. It was cool to be in there a little bit anyway. They got my wall jump, which is great. I love that I'm in that documentary and it's associated with the wall jump. Like that's my favorite part. Yeah.
Hell yeah. Okay, so if anybody has watched a marathon run of SMB3 in the last couple of years, there's a good chance they've heard your voice doing commentary. And by the way, SMB3 has some great commentators out there. Many of you do really great job. I love what you bring to the table. How is that something that you've always been doing, or is it something you just started trying? Like, how is it? Because it just sounds so natural when you're doing it. Everything you do, the info, it's entertaining. It's just, I love what you bring to the commentary. How'd you get started with doing some of that?
I just started doing it, volunteered. Yeah, that was really it. Tournaments always need commentary. I was like, yeah, let me try some commentary. Let me try some commentary in the randomizer tournament, warpless tournament, 100% tournament. We had that a few years ago. So that's basically it. Just started doing it, and people seem to enjoy it. I try to think about things after the fact too, of what I thought could have been better.
Yeah.
Sometimes I get feedback too about things, and try to incorporate that and just improve a little bit each time.
It's obvious you're friends with many of the SMB3 runners as well. I can just think back to AGDQ 2023 we just had. It sounds like you and Mitch were just having a great time during that run and everything. I think does that help out too, being around people and knowing the game so well?
Yeah, I think, he and I are friends, obviously. So there's a good chemistry there. I think that's important. There's certain people you do commentary with, especially if I've done it with them, that you have really good chemistry with. And I think that makes things a lot better. And just in my personal life, job related stuff, I've had to do a fair amount of like public speaking and stuff as well.
Oh, cool.
So I think that sort of stuff helps with it. I always hated public speaking. It's funny. I always hated like public speaking and things like this growing up.
Yeah.
But yeah, I've kind of been forced into doing it, and in a way that makes you a lot better, obviously, when you have to do it. So I think it helps. There's certain voices that when you listen to commentary, they're really easy to listen to, and it seems like people tell me that that's the way my voice is. So I think that helps too.
Dude,
I think that always the perception's better than maybe reality sometimes too.
I never would have guessed that, and so that's interesting to hear that you found a comfort level with it. There are folks, especially doing tech for GDQs and stuff. There are people who stream to 1,000 people every night, and they still get. There's a bit of apprehension when they get on that GDQ stage, and your voice doesn't sound like it has any of that, by the way. So even if you maybe, I don't know. Any nerves actually being on this? Yeah, okay. I was about to say, are there any nerves when you're on a stage like that? Because now you've done the live thing, you've done the online thing, tens of thousands of people, sometimes 100,000.
Commentary, no, not at this point. So 2020, when I did commentary for AGDQ 2020, I believe it was
that the last one we got to do live?
Sorry, AGDQ 2019. That's when it was. I did commentary for the 3 mix race. That's what it was. Yeah. I'm trying to remember when the 3 mix race was. I was nervous for that one a little bit because that was my first exposure to doing something on the GDQ stage was that commentary. So before I had that run, I think that actually kind of helped me a little bit going in the run as well. But like this last time doing commentary, not really, because I've done enough live marathon stuff. Right. I've done ESA a couple times. I've done GDQ a few times to where the commentary part, that's easy. Like I can talk about the game. Like that's super easy. Mitch had the stressful part. He's probably worrying about all this crap, not dying in like 1.6 and weird stuff like that always come up in your head only when you're doing a marathon run because you only get one shot at it. So yeah, I think that part is easy. When you're running, man, it's different. It's different.
It shouldn't have surprised me, but the first GDQ event I ever went to, and I remember seeing folks that make it look so easy when I watched them streaming, and then they're literally hours just grinding in the practice room because they want to put on the best possible show they can.
Yeah.
And I shouldn't have been surprised by it, but I kind of was, because I'm like, you want the thing to look good. You don't want to suck and get in there and crash and burn. So, which doesn't happen too often.
Yeah,
people do so much practice to get on before.
That was my experience on my first run, just watching Mitch and how he prepared for it is like, and then even AGQ 2019, watching him prepare for that 3 mix run, like he was the most prepared runner. And so he won, even though, Jabham had the world record at the time. And Jabham, I think, had the worst time in the race because there are a lot of reasons there. He wasn't, comfortable with the setup. And Mitch knows all this stuff because he's done it. It's like, you've got to be comfortable with the setup. You've got to do it in the practice room, loud noises. There's people walking everywhere. You've got to do it with the distractions because there's not a ton on stage, but there's going to be some. You've got people walking behind you doing tech stuff all the time. You got to be able to drown it out and ignore it. And just watching his preparation, just like every day, he's like, I got to go down there. I've got to put in this work. And he does it day after day to make sure it's going to work when he does the run. And just, seeing how he prepped has helped me prep for events in the future. And, I think it's part of the reason why a lot of them have gone pretty well. So.
Yeah, man, it definitely pays off. That seems to be working, to say the least. The last thing I want to ask you about is you've ran mini Kaiser Bros. You've done some of the ROM hacks, and which ones do you enjoy? Which ones would you recommend if folks wanted to try out some of them? Because there's quite a variety of them in the SMB3 world.
Yeah. So the best for like casual gameplay, you're gonna love this if you haven't played. It's 3 mix. SMB 3 mix is like. It's so good. It incorporates elements of like all the Marios up through Galaxy. So like, there's even Galaxy elements in the game. It's just a very, very cool game. There's worlds and levels dedicated to all the Mario games up to that point. So, if you really love something like that, you love Mario 3, you're going to love 3 mix. It's probably the best casual ROM hack that exists out there. It's just so much work was clearly done. Yeah. For that one,
and it's years old. It still blows my mind how much is in there considering when it was done as well.
Yep. So yeah, that Southbird put a lot of
so
time
good.
and work in there. Yeah. In terms of Kaizo stuff, so you want to get something a little dirty. That's tough. Mini Kaizo Bros. Obviously, it's one that's near and dear to me. It's very difficult. Most people will say you've got to understand a lot of like niche mechanics in Mario 3. I think to get that one. So it seems like people don't. At least they don't run it, or so people are kind of skeptical touching that one a little bit. But it's a great game. There's a lot of really fun and cool stuff in there. Once you open it up and get in there. Stuff like Super Column Bros. I ran a lot of Super Column Bros.
Oh, cool.
That one's really good. By the Incredible Paco. I think that one is probably maybe a little more approachable. I don't think it's easy either. I think it might be a little more approachable than Mini Kaiser Bros, but it's just kind of a different game. It's really well done. Everything's like really smooth. There's not a lot of like weird jank or frustrating things in it. You definitely put a lot of time into that. So there's a little bit of jank in Mini Kaiser Bros just because there's new mechanics that he added that's just like some of it's impossible to remove. But it ends up being a really fun game. So and then Super Rift Bros is another one kind of in it's not like a similar style to Column Bros, but it's kind of just like that classic Kaizo style, really fun game. Everything seems pretty fair in it. Really enjoyed that one too. So those are the three that I would recommend in terms of Kaizo, I guess.
And I definitely want to echo the Rift Bros as well. It's one of the, and I'm not a Kaizo player, but I didn't get all the way through it, but I was actually able to beat some levels in that game. It's one of those things where it's got a good flow to it, so you can. Yeah. The more you play it, you're gonna figure out the levels and stuff. So
exactly.
Any? Do you think you might speed run any of the some of the ROM hacks in the future? I know I'm looking at still the 100% in Mini Kaizo Bros world record, but I know you have a running Com Bros as well.
Yeah. I just don't know when I would get to it. I got my plans have kind of changed a little bit. I always did want to get back to them. I do want to play there's some newer ones I haven't played that are really good as well. So, I'd like to try some of those eventually, but I have some other goals with like multiple Mario stuff that kind of, I'm like, when can I get to all this stuff? There's so much stuff that I want to run. Totally. Like I want to eventually run Mario 64.
Oh, sick.
Like on my timeline is like, when the hell do I get to this? Is this like 5 years down the road at this point? I mean, so I've got a lot of other stuff I want to do beforehand, I think.
I was watching your SMB2 80% before, I think yesterday, prepping for this, and I'm like, you got a hell of a time on that one. These are tough categories, and it seems like, is it fun spending some time with games outside of the Mario 3 world?
Yeah, I really enjoy learning new runs, and just tinkering around with stuff and seeing like that instant like gratification of like, okay, I'm starting to get this,
Yeah.
I really do enjoy that. And I've always been interested in the multiple Mario stuff because it's so hard to just go from game to game because the mechanics change so much from game to game. That it's impressive when you watch like Rupert do it, or Ethan plays a lot of Mario games as well. And Maiba's doing it now. I think he's grinding a bunch of All-Stars games. So yeah, I think that stuff's impressive.
At some point, I would love to do an All-Stars, all four, something or another, whether it's all four or all five. But it's just such a cool run. It's fun to watch, and they're different. They are way different when you start playing them, Yes. And then the All-Stars aspect's different too. Right? Oh, the camera's still so weird for me. I struggle with SMB3 All-Stars. Yeah, definitely. One of the last things I wanted to ask you about is most of the time, if you tune into your stream, there's definitely some Mario action going. Do you play anything off stream, or are there other types of games that you enjoy? You mentioned some of the competitive gaming you do. Do you play any other games like for fun and stuff outside of the Mario stuff? Right now it's like RuneScape, I guess. There you go. Okay.
I don't know if you ever played RuneScape. Sometimes I play it while I'm actually doing attempts too, but I'm doing like kind of AFK stuff on the side. So I'll be like looking at chat over here. I'm like, all right, cool. I can click over here, start fishing or chopping the tree or whatever. And I'm like doing the run. And yeah, you just pick and choose your spots. So there's a little bit of that. Poke Clicker is another good one to do. It's just like a click-based Pokemon RPG style game that I can do while I'm streaming and doing runs. Otherwise, man, off-stream games I've played recently, it's not a ton because like the speedrunning thing does take up a lot of time. So, and whatever time I don't do that is basically RuneScape. So, I think the last thing I played was Demon Souls Remake.
Oh, there you go. Okay.
For PS5. I played that entirely off stream, and I really enjoyed that. That was before I played Elden Ring, but I played that one on stream. So I played some other games, but it's been on stream. Like I played Elden Ring, I played Dark Souls 1.
Did you do like a whole day stream or something like that of Elden Ring? Did you? Was there like a 24 hours of that?
Yeah, so when I was playing Elden Ring, there was a day where I played 23 hours. It was not intentional. Yeah, I got the 23 hours and I was like, dude, this can't be a 24-hour stream. Like, we just can't. No, not. I was enjoying it. I was getting into it.
Yeah, it was just, good.
I was like, I couldn't set it down. Like, just a little more, just a little more, just a little more. And then all of a sudden it's, like 10 a.m. and you're like, shit.
I have yet to play a Soulsborne game, but I've heard Elden Ring is actually a good one to actually give a go at. And I'm curious, you've played some of them, so what was your thoughts on that?
The hardest parts of Elden Ring, I think, are the hardest of the series, but you don't have to play them the hardest way. So
that's cool.
Yeah,
that's kind
of gives you a lot of tools.
Yeah. That's super forgiving, actually.
Yeah. There are a lot of like consumables you can use. There are summons you can use. So, the standard way most people beat those games is no summons. So when I went through as like no summons, no consumables, I'll beat it this way. I always play magic, which people frown upon, but I'm like, I think it's boring to play those games. You just get your weapon and you just like swing at shit. It's just like, I've done this so many times. Like, why would I do that when I can just like throw balls of fire at something? Right. Isn't that so much cooler? I feel like it's cooler to me.
Yeah, totally.
But, most people don't play it that way. And they're like, oh, you're playing magic? It's so easy. As they see me get like 2-shot because like I'm magic. So I'm a glass cannon. It's just like, yeah, you got to be able to dodge when you play magic. And also some of the enemies are a lot harder for me, and they're super easy when you melee them. So I usually end up kind of going into like a hybrid style build so I have solutions for a lot of different things. And I really enjoy that. The old tank style hybrid build where it's just like anything. I can deal with anything,
I need to dive back into Magic. I played Paper when I was I shouldn't say kid, I was a teenager, and I haven't revisited. I think this was around 3rd edition or 4th revised, somewhere around there. I can't remember when, but I know Arena. A lot of people talk about Arena being fun and things like that, and I just haven't. I need to give it a try. It seems like it's a reasonable thing to jump into.
Yeah, I have a friend that got really into that. So, years ago, he's out of it now,
right?
Although he plays some Hearthstone, so it's kind of like similar vein.
That's been my thing. That's what I'll do when I'm relaxing on the couch. I'll boot up a couple games of Hearthstone and things like that.
Oh yeah. So. I played some of the Battlegrounds on Hearthstone when that came out. Like the auto chess,
right?
Yes. Version of it, basically.
People like me can't think that well through, but you do need to think. There's still strategy involved, so.
Oh yeah. I mean, obviously, there's a lot of RNG involved in terms of like what cards you draw, but there's a lot of strategy. Like you might get a shit draw, but it doesn't mean you got to take last place. You can find the way to squeeze out, like those 6 places, and sometimes that's important, especially when you're trying to gain rank to not, lose so much. So
absolutely. I feel like we've covered quite a bit. There's one other thing that I wanted to ask about, and if you don't mind, and I over the weekend I had a coaching session. Eon taught me basically to play Zelda 2, and I had watched one of your streams. I think you did one of your coaching streams on your stream, and I never quite understood like how valuable that could actually be. Like it blew my mind how much I learned in just 5 hours of playing the game. I don't know if you still do it, but can you tell me a little bit about like how has that worked for you as somebody who has done coaching and like has it helped your own game, or what is the process? It sounds super interesting. I mean, it blew my mind, to be honest with you.
Yeah, sometimes people ask questions and I kind of have to think about things that I've never really thought about. I've just kind of done.
Yeah.
That happened yesterday. There was like a strat. Someone asked me like, what's the visual cue? And I was thinking about it. I'm like, there's just like a rhythm to it.
Yeah.
Like that's kind of a bad answer, but yeah, I just kind of like do it the way I'm supposed to. So, and I go through, do it the way I'm supposed to. I'm like, okay, this would be like a good visual cue. I'm like, yeah. Now I think about it, I'm like, it probably would have been like way more consistent sooner if I just started doing visual cue, this way.
There you go.
Yeah, you think through stuff like that, but I got started doing that. There's a streamer. I watch a lot of Dota 2.
Okay.
Because I used to play a lot of Dota 2.
Yeah.
I don't anymore because it's way too toxic.
It is.
The games, man. It's absurd. You join a game and like people are flaming before the game even starts in an on-ranked match, and it's terrible. But
it's brutal.
The game itself is like super fun, and like what you can do and what you're capable of doing, and the teamwork aspect when it comes together, like all that is really cool. But yeah, I watch this streamer. His name is Banana Slamma Jamma.
Yeah.
And he's a Dota 2 streamer, and he would do coaching sessions.
Cool.
And I was like, that seems like an interesting concept to do, but for speedrunning.
Yeah.
And so I just kind of like started doing it, offering just free services for speedrunning. Just put up certain requirements, because at a certain point, I want people to get to a certain point, because if you're just getting started, I don't have a lot for you,
right?
Because you need to get better at everything. There's not a lot we can just highlight, be like, and that process is going to be a lot different for everybody. And there's enough tools out there to get started to where, like to see people put in a little bit of effort first, get like a sub hour in warpless or sub 120 and 100%. And then, we kind of do a coaching session, and then I take a look and watch through the PB videos, and I have a OneNote where I make notes in there, different
cool.
things, going through that, mistakes they make. So there's questions that I ask, and I can ask them too, like, are there things in this run that, went well that normally don't? Because that's important too, because it's hard for me without watching your entire run history, which no one has the time to do, to know like what exactly you're struggling with. Yeah. So, I try to ask questions like that. So I kind of make notes for things and things that I think, I think you're ready for this, or a lot of the suggestions end up being, I notice people have really clean early games in Mario 3, and then their late game, like it's like World 4. Once they hit World 4, it starts falling apart. And then it's just like the wheels keep coming off the train as it goes further down the road. I'm like, and I see that, I'm like, you reset way too much. I know you do, because this, I'll see people with like a 53-minute time, and I'm like, you're only 20 seconds behind me out of World 3, and we're 15 minutes in the game. So like, yeah, you have pretty good early game. Don't worry about the early game. If you lose a minute versus this, you're still fine. You gotta nail down that late game. So you got to start, pushing some runs past there. So a lot of times, suggestions like that I'll admit I was terrible at that for a really long time. It's like, I'd always watch Mitch sometimes, and Mitch does this. I'm like, I never understood why Mitch would finish out crap runs. I'm like, why the hell do you finish crap runs? Like, it's a waste of time to play 10 minutes of World 8, right?
Yeah.
He finishes crap runs because you get through the game. It's a process of like, you play through the whole game. You get to play through World 8. maybe the next run you got to play through World 8, and it could be 5 hours in the stream, and you haven't played through World 8 for 5 hours, and it gets you ready, right? So I learned like small things from that, and I don't know if I feel like he does that on purpose. I've never really talked to him about it, but I don't know if he does or not. But I think it is valuable in an indirect way. He might be doing it for an entertainment purpose. People love seeing completed runs, but I think it's also valuable
for his own sanity. Who knows? But
too.
No, that's a really good point, because I've thought about that. We talked about it earlier, where you don't want to practice shit because that's just going to make more shit. But
exactly.
Like finishing it out with actually like, okay, treating it as if you were on PB pace and you're going for it.
Exactly.
Because you're not going to get a chance to get to that part if you don't. So it's a really good point.
Exactly.
Oh man, I do a lot of my speed running on TurboGrafx 16, and I finish out runs because we don't have save states yet. Like that's just, we're forced to, but this is the only way we can practice the end game. But I hadn't thought about how much I'm probably benefit. Like I usually have a pretty good confidence going into late games, except for fucking last night where I missed on the last hit of the boss. But anyway, that's aside.
You're playing it all the time, right? So you're just like, I just played it, so I just got to do the same thing I did last run.
Yeah.
And I think there's a fair amount of value in that. As you mentioned it, you can kind of treat it too and kind of emulate the pressure to extent, especially if you try like, all right, I'm going to try to go for a gold split, or things like that. There are small things you can do that kind of, up the pressure a little bit, because the hardest thing is navigating that and figuring out how to do it. A really bad habit I used to have is just thinking about everything that can go wrong.
Ooh, yeah.
When you're going in the level, and then it does, and that happens, something happens. And it's just like, well, of course it did, because I was thinking about it the whole time, instead of just being like, all right, let's just play, let's just play. I just got to play the same way I do it every time. Don't really have to think much about it, just do it the same way. So
I sometimes, in fact, I don't sometimes, I quite often watch back a previous PB or a previous failure, and I'm like, what am I doing? This is like the simplest thing ever. If I would have just stayed calm, and the mindset thing like you're talking about, having that positive, okay, I know, press the button there, just going through on that flow to it, as opposed to, oh crap, this can go wrong, this can go wrong,
Exactly. It's like, don't get out of your rhythm. I feel like, for me, rhythm's super important. I feel like once I make a mistake, that's when like 5 other things just come out, and it's just like, where the hell is this? Like, how do I mess up? I never mess up like 2 levels in a row when I play them. Like, how the hell did I mess up 5? It just blows my mind. But it's so much of that, like you mentioned, the basketball players, practicing perfect, right? Doing the perfect reps. That is so important. It builds a rhythm with things as well. And I think there's a lot of rhythm, and that's why I like the full world practice, because you get that rhythm of just like first level, second level, third level,
It's not a fluke or by accident that Curry hits half court shots. Like, he practices that and he gets a bunch of them right in a row. It's that whole thing again. Okay. I think this is going to have to be the last one, because I think this is such a good question from Junkyard Dave. Did you realize you were a god before you grew your beard, or after?
That's a good question. Honestly, the beard thing was just everybody was home during the pandemic, and I always wanted to grow a beard. I didn't have to go out in public, so I kind of got to go past the stage of looking terrible. And although there's stages that look terrible, but it looks decent now.
Yeah.
Anyway, and that's it. Did I realize I was God before or after? I don't think I've attained that status yet. So, I think I need a few more world records to maybe get to that status, especially in Mario 3. So,
well, you have had a PB with the beard now, so it's like there
had a few, had a few.
Haxor, thanks so much for doing this deep dive and talking all these things. It's super interesting hearing it from your perspective and just like seeing what it takes to actually grind this thing out and to keep going with it. If people want to watch some of this grind, I know you kind of stream like me late at night sometimes, but where can people find you? What are some of the times that you do streaming and do your attempts and stuff?
Yeah, I've gotten better at streaming earlier.
Oh, good.
I usually end by midnight Mountain time.
Cool.
So I'm in Arizona. So twitch.tv/TheHaxor obviously is my Twitch channel. You can find me there. Try to stream Monday, Wednesday, Friday, and Sunday. Sometimes those weekday days change because I get off work and maybe I just pass out for 3 hours, and that's not good. And I don't want to start at 8 because then we get into the old degen times. We don't want to be streaming at 3 a.m. and then having to get up at 8. So we try to set a cutoff. Also, the dog appreciates it because he needs walks. So but yeah, that's where you can find me. I also have my YouTube channel, which is TheHaxor Speedrun.
Okay.
And I upload all my previous PBs there. Gonna be working on some different content there too. Cool. I've done a couple educational things on there.
Yeah.
For Mario 3 and want to do some more, as well as some not necessarily Mario 3 related stuff eventually, but it's hard. It's hard to find time, but eventually.
I also want to give a shout out to the new Mario Discord, as you say, because I know you moderate that, and that's like, there's got to be 1,000 people in there. It's pretty wild. Like
I think we're at 3,000.
3,000. Holy cow! Okay, I didn't realize that many.
I think so. Yeah, it's wild. It's gotten pretty big.
It's the great. I know there's a lot of good info. People have done some great tutorials and stuff on Mario 3. I used when Chuck Attacks. I used his tutorial when I learned the game. Surprisingly enough, and which is still, even though it's older, it's got a lot of good info in there. But there is nothing like asking somebody a specific question and getting a specific answer, and that's one of the things I love about that Discord.
Hey, that's what I did with SMB2U. I mean, every question I had, I just popped it in that chat, and it was like, all right, Kurt, Ethan, cool kid, someone's going to answer.
You're getting a good one, so.
Yep.
Well, thanks again for sharing all the info and giving me the time, man. I do appreciate it. Good luck on the rest of the grinds, and this unfortunately, this won't go live before Junkyard Days Run, but I know you have a marathon run coming up here over the weekend, so thanks again for doing this, man. Really appreciate it. Thanks everyone for listening and watching. If you're enjoying the podcast, please feel free, subscribe, leave a comment, all that stuff people say at the end of a video. It honestly all goes a long way to help the podcast. Thank you so much. If you want to join us on Discord, we chat mostly about food, but occasionally we do talk about the stuff that's in the podcast. The link is in the show notes or in the description. Feel free. Come on by. Join us. If you want to follow on Twitter, Sequence Break PC. Sequence Break PC. I post when I go live. It's kind of not at a set time, so if you want to see the live feed of the podcast, feel free, follow there. And finally, if you want to email, podcast@sequencebreakpodcast.com. Sequencebreakpodcast.com is also where you can find the backlog of all of the episodes. It's also on YouTube as well, so feel free, join in, have some fun. Thank you so much. I will see ya in the next one.